Thanks, everyone. Thanks very much for coming and spending some of your time with us this morning. My name is Steve Foden. I am Head of Energy Policy here at DEFA, and I'm going to talk to you about the ways in which we can help support you through current cost of living crisis, help decarbonise our homes, and think a bit about the future of low carbon heat on the island. I'm going to cover why we need to decarbonise building heat. Then I'm going to cover the main part of the talk. We'll cover the schemes we have in place to help support the community, deliver the benefits of energy efficiency, get lower bills, lower carbon emissions, and so on. And then I'll spend a few slides at the end talking about the future of heating and the low carbon heat strategy we're developing and future government support schemes. So the climate change team do a lot of work at the moment, sort of annual basis, surveying public opinions in relation to climate and energy issues. And they've just finished a survey, actually, that concluded over the summer, and the results are out, were received a couple of weeks ago, and a substantial majority of the public, rate the issue of climate change as a serious issue, something that they're extremely concerned about, and 62%, again, a pretty good majority, think that the Isle of Man could be doing more to reach net zero. So we have a level of public concern and consent for climate change policies, and a level of concern that we're actually not being quite ambitious enough. And similarly, we have a high level of concern about future current energy bills, financial cost of energy bills, and similar number, 76% of people minimising the amount of energy they use at home as a consequence of those pressures that they're seeing in terms of their energy bills. And we've not, I think it's the Cabinet Office who run the fuel poverty survey. It's not been done recently, but the last survey that they undertook sort of 2 or 3 years ago, depending on how you actually measured, fuel poverty showed that between 9 and 16% of households were in fuel poverty, and we assume that's risen significantly since. So those are the twin drivers of climate action, and energy poverty, energy bills being high, are very much strong motivators behind the policy development work we've been doing in this area over the past few years. Perhaps comes as a bit of a surprise on the emissions side of things that actually the way we heat our buildings, our homes and our offices is actually the biggest emission source on island, even bigger than burning the gas and diesel in the power plants to provide power generation. So it's a really significant emission source that we need to grapple with. And grappling with it entails the Climate Change Action Plan, which was approved in Tynwald last year, sets the net zero deadline for 2050, has a series of interim emission reduction targets in 2030 and 2035, and as well in this specific context sets a target of 15% reduction in building emissions by 2027, which is actually quite an ambitious target. So there's a lot of work being done in the background to set up the policies that will help us deliver a reduction in our building emissions. And if we get those policies right, they'll also deliver warmer, comfier homes with lower bills for people. And that's the real opportunity that we see here, this ability to meet two really key political and societal goals. And so on to the support schemes themselves, and I'll run through each of those in turn. So, end of last year, early this year, we launched the Energy Efficiency Scheme. So this is a scheme where you can get free energy saving items worth up to £750 per household, plus an additional £500 for certain eligible households to provide support for installation. You can order essentially from a list of items of simple, relatively easy to install energy efficiency measures, draft excluders, LED light bulbs, loft insulation, and more. And it's basically open to everyone as long as you meet the relevant eligibility criteria, which I'll talk to you in a second about. And essentially the sort of basic process we'd recommend is that you take a look at your home energy needs, think about the most effective measures that you might have, might be available to you in your home, and you complete an order form, get a voucher, and you redeem a voucher, participate in depots. I won't go too much into the details of the practicalities because we have the energy efficiency team on hand to guide you through this if this is of interest. They'll be out in the atrium, sort of upstairs in the corner over there after the talk. So any kind of practical advice you want will be available. But essentially, it's a pretty straightforward process, we hope. And it's not generally often that the government just like gives you stuff for free. So we'd very much encourage people who are eligible to engage with the scheme. And it's hopefully as straightforward to access as we could possibly make it. And in terms of eligibility, there's two broad criteria or two broad categories. One is if you're in receipt of a set of stated benefits, which are listed there, which is pretty much all benefits. And the other route that you might take would be an income-based threshold. There's two income-based thresholds. The first one is relatively straightforward. It's just if you and every other adult member of your household earns less than the Isle of Man median wage, which is defined there, and then you can be eligible through a second income-based threshold, which is that the combined income of your household does not exceed £50,000 a year. So this has led to a little bit of confusion, but basically you can be eligible through either of those routes. And we added the second one in, the £50,000 a year one, because essentially to capture that category of household in which somebody might earn, say, £33,000 a year, someone earns £14,000 a year. Overall, the household isn't necessarily hugely well off, and we didn't want them to be excluded just because one of them earned over the median income. So yeah, there's two categories of income threshold, and you can be eligible under either of those, or just basically if you're in receipt of any of the stated benefits. And then on the far right-hand side of the screen, if you're in receipt of any of those benefits and you're eligible through the initial two categories, you can claim an additional £500 to support installation of some of the free items that we're providing. And in practice, that will be loft insulation. Really, but it's there to help for people who might struggle to do some of the installation themselves. As I mentioned, the process of getting a voucher, applying online, getting a voucher, going to a participating depot is hopefully relatively straightforward, but we're very mindful of the need to try and reach out as proactively as we possibly can to engage as many people within the community as possible, particularly vulnerable groups who might not find out about this through social media or conventional media channels and marketing channels, but would really benefit from the scheme itself. And so we've been really keen and proactive in trying to reach those groups. And so Angie and Elaine, who are in the audience and you can talk to afterwards, they've been doing an incredible job of going out to community events, charity events, events at local commissioners to try and talk to residents and make them aware of the scheme and how they can apply and get the measures. And this is something we'll be doing a lot more of over the course of the winter as energy bills start to go up as we use more fuel. And so there's almost certainly going to be an event near you at some point over the coming months. And we'll also be launching more conventional kind of marketing campaigns as well. So again, try and reach as many people as we possibly can. In terms of reaching people, the scheme has done a sort of solid job so far. We've got to a bit over 2,000 households reached, and so we're pleased with that. But we'd like to see it scale up more. So we're really going to push it over the winter because we want to see people receive the benefits of these measures. And in terms of benefits, we're deploying a set of hopefully pretty straightforward, simple energy efficiency items, but ones that, despite their simplicity, are actually quite impactful. It's pleasing to see that some of the most impactful measures are the ones that people have been taking up most. Loft insulation, if you're going from a home with very little loft insulation to topping up, to putting in place 300 millimetres worth of loft insulation, you could be saving yourselves hundreds of pounds a year on your energy bills for free. Even the really straightforward, simple, basic stuff can have an impact as well. There was a neat study when we were designing the scheme that looked at the most cost-effective combination of different measures such as this, and they concluded that if you put into place the water tank insulation and just simple draft exclusion measures around your windows, you could save 5 to 8% on your energy bills. So they're simple, but that doesn't mean they're not impactful and effective. And so we're really keen that people can take these up, reduce their energy bills, and also provide a platform on which future low carbon heat technologies can be more efficiently deployed. So yeah, it's gone well so far, but we're keen to ramp it up and roll it out even further, so as many people as possible can receive the benefits. And supporting the scheme itself, we have launched in the last 3 months or so an energy doctor service. Again, energy doctors are here; they can help talk to you afterwards, and that's a free home energy health check, if you like, for any Isle of Man household. So you don't have to be eligible through any particular set of criteria. You can just apply to us and go out, and the energy doctor will come and give you advice, give you a 90-minute home energy audit, and they'll give you really practical, simple, straightforward advice to help improve your energy efficiency of your home and lower your bills. They'll also, for some of the items that you can get free under the energy efficiency scheme, even help fit those. So it's a really fantastic service we're really proud of, and we really encourage people to engage with it. And the next slide shows some of the items that the energy doctor have been helping to hand out and fit. So again, a wide, diverse range of things. If people are worried about being able to do it themselves or might be less able to do it, energy doctor can help. They've been getting absolutely fantastic feedback from the sort of 300 or so people who've been able to benefit from the service. And there's been a series of kind of common themes that emerge in island homes that can be easily fixed and deliver significant bill savings. Boiler's not set to the optimal setting. Most people's gas boiler at home will be set with a flow temperature that's far too high, unnecessarily high, delivering heat in the pipes that doesn't need to. The boiler isn't condensing. It's running less efficiently. It's too hot, and you could get the same level of warmth and comfort with a lower flow temperature. And saving yourselves money. Again, no or little loft insulation. A surprisingly large number of properties on the island, and we know this through the private sector housing survey, have very little loft insulation, and topping it up to a sensible level will save you a lot of money on your bills on an annual basis. Even if you've got a moderate amount, topping it up will still be a beneficial thing to do. So there's simple stuff that can be done that will save a significant amount of money. And again, we'd encourage you to engage with the energy doctor. The next scheme that's available is a scheme run by DFE, not for enterprise. That's the Green Living Grant Scheme. That offers financial help of up to nearly £6,000 for eligible homes. It's open to properties with an energy performance rating of D or below. That's actually might sound quite restrictive, but that's actually a lot of properties on the Isle of Man. We have a very poor housing stock in terms of energy efficiency. So D or below on the EPC rating scale is an awful lot of homes. And you can get 75% grant support from DFE for a set of recommended works for a value of less than £1,000 or 50% for a value of over £1,000. So I got loft insulation through this. That's great. And there's quite a wide range of measures that are eligible for grant support. So essentially, the process is Manx Home Energy Auditor comes and audits your home. They will make a calculation based on the observations that they see as they're passing through your house to determine what your energy performance rating is. If it's D or below, you're eligible, and then it will make a series of recommendations of measures that then DFE will support based on the output of that survey. And there's also in the guidance a few extra things that you're eligible for, even if they're not on that Manx Home Energy Audit survey outcome. And it's open to a wide range of people, and it's got a pretty wide range of income threshold. So household can't exceed over £100,000 income, and so it's open to a wide range of people. Basically, you just have to have a house. You either have to not be a millionaire or have a house of EPC D or below. And again, it's been rolled out to a good number of properties now, nearly £1 million worth of expenditure. And a lot of people seeing the benefits of energy efficiency in their home and measures to cut carbon, and they are again people have been taking up those really impactful measures, which is good to see. People installing double glazing, loft insulation, external doors, all things that will improve the fabric of your home and make a significant contribution to decreasing your energy bills, as well as cutting carbon. So that's a Green Living Grant Scheme. And then final scheme that's available at the moment is the Manx Utilities Heat Pump Trial, which offers interest-free loans to people who want to switch to having a heat pump installed. They'll support you through the process, because we're sort of aware it can be a kind of technically daunting issue potentially, but people are seeing really significant energy savings as a result of the increased energy efficiency of a heat pump compared to a gas boiler in particular. And yeah, that's receiving a lot of really positive feedback. And I'll come on to some of the issues that emerge from the results of the trial in a subsequent slide. But essentially, people who've had the heat pumps installed as part of the Max Utilities trial return a really, really positive, high level of satisfaction in the performance of their heat pump. They operate successfully in a diverse range of properties. And people, particularly if you're on gas at the moment, people are saving huge sums of money on their energy bills when they've had their heat pump installed. So this person is £770 a year they're saving compared to gas, and we expect that to be not uncommon. And again, I'll come on to that later. So that's the Max Utilities heat pump trial. And now I want to talk in the last section about the kind of future of building heat, our thinking in this respect, and future energy support schemes that the government are thinking about developing. And the point of this slide, these are some of the kind of thematic areas that the future low carbon heat strategy, which will be published in 2024, which I'm working on at the moment, these are some of the thematic areas that the low carbon heat strategy will seek to address. And the key point I just wanted to make on this slide is we think a successful policy in this space only works if you have all of these different factors mutually supporting with each other, positively interacting with each other, and not doing any one bit of that, any one bit of those policy measures in isolation. Because if they're done in isolation, they won't complement each other, and they ultimately won't drive uptake of low carbon heat measures in a way that we hope will deliver the benefits in terms of decarbonisation and comfier, warmer homes, lower bills, etc. So just as a kind of illustration, the second point there is to talk about our plans to set out, while we won't be saying every X number of homes need to have Y technology, we want to set out a vision of the kind of technologies we see being deployed to decarbonise heat on island. And it's only by sending out that clear signal of the kind of technologies that we think are the future that the public will have confidence to know that they should invest in those technologies when they're ready to switch. So you wouldn't buy a heat pump if you were worried that in 2 years' time the government would say heat pumps are a terrible idea, for example. So if you build that public confidence and give that clear direction to the market, you can develop the supply chains. If you develop the supply chains, the public have the confidence to know that they can install these measures because there'll be a trusted and reliable supplier available. So it's only by delivering all of these things in a coherent way, mutually supporting, that we can deliver success in terms of low carbon heat deployment. And so our intention is to look at each of these, develop policies and actions under each of these in a way that will be, as I say, mutually consistent and coherent. So yeah, that's the sort of overarching view of the low carbon heat strategy. And to support the development of it, we've been doing a lot of evidence building over the past kind of couple of years, and that's still ongoing, but we now have a good basis and platform on which to develop future policies in this space. So as an example, we commissioned GemServe to produce the Isle of Man renewable heating scenarios. That reported last year. And they set out a series of 3 different potential routes of the future, depending on a set of starting assumptions. A key assumption, and I'll kind of touch on this a bit again in a subsequent slide, but a key assumption is around the level of fabric improvements, essentially the level of kind of insulation that your home has. The more insulation your home has, the better able the model was to deploy heat pumps. If you have less insulation in certain properties, you're more likely to deploy a technology that can give heat out a greater amount of heat. And depending on how you shift those assumptions, you get varying deployment of various different technologies. Each scenario has an absolutely key role for heat pumps, and then they differ depending on the set of starting assumptions in terms of deployment of different technologies like heat pumps, bioenergy, district heat. In none of the scenarios, interestingly, was there a role for hydrogen. We continue to be open-minded, but nevertheless, that's what our evidence suggests at the moment. And this is just one illustrative example to kind of build on the point I was making there. This is the most kind of radical, might not be quite the right word, but the most ambitious scenario in terms of improving the fabric of our homes, getting insulation in place, fixing your leaks, etc. And the more you do that, the more the model found it cost optimal to deploy heat pumps. And so you get an incredibly electrification heavy scenario, almost no biomass, but still some role for district heat, particularly in urban areas. So that was one of those scenarios. And a point I just wanted to stress on this slide is that really we have technologies that are actually ready to deploy now. We're not waiting on some sort of speculative technology future in order to be able to decarbonise heat and also deliver the benefits that these technologies can provide in terms of lower bills, etc. And so a big UK heat pump trial just concluded, and actually this found that contrary to a lot of kind of widely held perception, heat pumps can be used in pretty much any housing type and age as well. So this is pre-1900s up to 2010s, and the level of deployment of heat pumps in the trial, and they were all perfectly successful. And actually, in general terms, you didn't require major fabric improvements to people's home. You have to have a sensible level of fabric improvement to make your heat source cost effective. And that's the same regardless of the heat source. You should have a cost-effective level of insulation, even if you have a gas boiler or an oil boiler. But generally, they found that you didn't have to go crazy with the level of fabric improvements of people's home for it to be cost-effective to install a heat pump. And that's somewhat contrary to the narrative that's kind of built up over the years. We're not going to be, solid wall, having to have solid wall in everybody's homes solid wall insulation in everybody's home to make heat pumps sensible. They also returned a high level of consumer satisfaction, and people are seeing very big operational cost savings. We're aware that the capital requirements to shift are significant, but on a cost basis, operational cost basis, we're seeing very big cost savings, particularly in relation to gas. I mentioned that on the earlier slide in respect to the Manx Utilities heat pump trial, that example of £770 someone was saving on their bills, and that's consistent with the modelling that we've done when switching from gas or oil to a heat pump. It's certainly the case for gas, and this is a figure that shows heat pump efficiency going up on the right against a range of 3 different boiler efficiencies. And even at relatively poorly performing heat pump efficiencies, you're saving sort of £400, £500, £600 compared to a gas boiler. It's much less clear for an oil boiler. It's much more challenging because oil is just differentially much cheaper. And it's in the case of oil consumers, you need a much more efficient heat pump in order to deliver any cost savings. And that's why it comes back to that point I made earlier about having all these moving parts within a heat strategy working consistently, because you get highly performing heat pumps that deliver cost savings for even oil consumers if you have a well-trained and expert supply chain. So that's why all of these things, as I mentioned, have to work in parallel with each other and be consistent. I just want to stress we're not completely wedded just to heat pumps, just to make that clear. And the heat decarbonisation strategy will look at a wide range of technologies, and we're open-minded as to which ones are most suitable, but that we see heat pumps as playing an important role. We've done I mentioned earlier, we've done some survey work recently, and this is again feeding into our decision-making process. And unsurprisingly, broadly speaking, kind of Isle of Man residents are pretty up for the transition, but they want to see the financial benefits and they're keen on the environmental benefits. Like nothing hugely surprising there, but that's what we recognise as imperative to sort of maximise in the development of policy in this area. And ultimately, this is. So I just left a presentation, started off the presentation for the Manx Utilities Renewables projects, and notwithstanding the sort of controversy that may exist around that, it's relatively straightforward to decarbonise the power system, in my opinion. Decarbonising people's homes, however, you're getting into the way people live their daily lives, and that's potentially much more challenging from a policy perspective. We absolutely believe that it can deliver real benefits for consumers, for households, as well as helping to decarbonise the economy, but it's challenging, and so we need to find the most cost-effective approach. We need to work with the industry to develop supply chains. We need to give a confidence to consumers that they're making the right decision, and ultimately deliver an experience for consumers that meets their needs as affordably as possible. And so this infographic just sort of illustrates some of the issues we'll be thinking about in the development of our policies. Finally, I think, we recognise, as I mentioned earlier, though you can see, particularly for gas consumers, big cost savings, operational cost savings. We're aware that the transition itself, getting the technology in place, is costly and potentially quite daunting, although costs continue to fall, or costs are falling in some areas potentially. Nevertheless, it's a big financial burden. And so we're committed in 2024, in the DEFA departmental plan, is to come up with a new low carbon heat support scheme that replaces the Green Living Grant scheme and replaces the energy efficiency scheme, and sets a platform to support households in the next sort of step in this decarbonisation transition. Currently, we're conducting a lot of research into how we most effectively and target and support people on different income groups. So what we're basically doing is we've got some economists looking at the question of, well, given the cost of a heat pump to buy, for example, a heat pump, the cost of a heat pump to operate, where does that financial sort of sweet spot? Where does the financial sweet spot lie that makes it economically sensible to switch from your current technology to that new technology? And what level of government support might be appropriate to incentivise that switch? And how does that level of government support vary by different income groups? Again, coming back to that point that we take incredibly seriously the issue of fairness and equity in this transition. And then once we've done that, we're going to review the different financing mechanisms that might be appropriate to support that, like grants or zero interest loans, for example. And we're going to test those through a series of focus groups and workshops to determine which, after the models have done their nerdy modelling stuff in model world, what people actually find most appealing out in the real world. And as part of that, we're going to figure out what technologies we want to support in this scheme, both in terms of the low carbon heat source itself and the energy efficiency measures that we provide alongside that. Again, coming back to that question of what's the cost optimal level of energy efficiency that you need in place to have an effective low carbon heat source. And as well, we're working very closely with DOI on measures to support people in public sector housing, once again to make sure that no one's left behind in this transition and supporting everyone across the entire community. So that will hopefully launch next year. And replace the schemes I've mentioned already. Those schemes, though, are currently running and they're great and everyone should apply for them. And just the final slide is to say, as I mentioned, I kind of gave a bit of a quick overview of what those schemes look like, but the team is on hand. They'll be in the atrium, go out there, turn left, then turn right, and they'll be there to help you guide you through the process of what the energy efficiency scheme in particular looks like, and what the energy doctors can offer, in case you have any more kind of detailed questions on process. And I think that's it. So very happy to take questions, looking at the time. Yeah, that's pretty much on time. So very happy to take questions. In the short term, and then I'd encourage you to go out and chat to the team if this is something you want to get involved in. So, question.
Discounted biomass, why?
I haven't discounted biomass. I discounted biomass in one particular scenario. Oh God. But discounted biomass in this scenario because the model is a cost optimizer. It suits the lowest cost solution, and the lowest cost technology solution in a world in which you've improved your fabric improvements sufficiently is a heat pump in this scenario. But in other scenarios, we've got biomass played a much bigger role, both through direct biomass combustion and also hybrid heat pumps that run on biomass and electricity. So yeah, we're not just heat pump evangelists. We're thinking about a wide range of technologies, and biomass is absolutely key in that, or potentially absolutely key. The other aspect of biomass, so HVO being another example for people on boilers might be a neat solution. So we're doing some work thinking about biomass kind of supply chains at the moment, both as they relate to heat and also potentially power sector decarbonisation. So yeah, we do see biomass as an important solution. Yes.
And what standards and sort of goods?
Yeah, so so top one there, building performance standards. So closely talking to Richard Baker and his team. There's a commitment in the Climate Change Action Plan to bring in the future home standard for new build, and then we're talking about what to do with EPC ratings. Excitingly, the Isle of Man under the new SAP is going to have a Isle of Man area within that, so we'll have much better data to build EPC work on. So yeah, absolutely thinking about those issues as well. And that's another example where you put the point I keep harping on about is having all these things working together and supporting each other. Having the building standards in place helps facilitate all the other aspects, really. So yeah, that's something we're working closely with Richard and his team on. Yes.
So you mentioned a lot about insulation and energy. To what extent do these scenarios take into account other aspects of comfort, such as damp or mold growth?
Yeah.
Within a building?
Yeah, so the scenarios we have don't, as an illustrative example, they don't include any cavity wall insulation because of worries about wind-driven rain and damp issues. So yeah, it does. We are factoring those sort of issues in, which is a bit frustrating because cavity wall insulation is incredibly cost-effective.
There will going to be scenarios where that will be possible.
I think so too. And there's a map of I think it might just be called the wind-driven rain map that BRE have of levels of wind-driven extremities. And the Isle of Man's like, it's very wind-driven rainy here. You probably shouldn't do cavity wall insulation. My parents live in the northwest of England, which is similarly wind-driven rainy. West coast of Scotland, Cornwall, all of these places fare quite badly on that map. But people are installing cavity wall insulation. My parents have it and it's fine. There's no damp problems whatsoever. So I am, whilst always deferring to the expertise of building planning control colleagues, keen to explore with them whether there's potentially a greater role for cavity wall insulation. But we'd have to do that very carefully because there is big damp issues, I know. And it's not my specific area of expertise, so that's why I would always defer to them on that. But it would be frustrating if we couldn't use that very cost-effective technology, I think.
Does that work?
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask about the grant schemes that you mentioned. I forget all the different ones. Are any of those applicable to rented households, as in when, would it be assessed on the household income of the tenant? And then
it would. Obviously, we'd encourage people who wish to apply to speak to their landlord first. But yes, it's basically anyone can apply.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Yes, lady.
There seemed to be quite a low take-up of the energy efficiency scheme for local authority housing. Is there any reason why people in local authority housing have to apply for that, or should it not be getting rolled out as standard to those properties?
So that's a very good question. To some extent, I would defer to DOI and housing boards as to why that may or may not be the case. But we are keen to work closely with them to deploy these measures as much as possible to people in social housing, because we recognise, going back to the fairness point, there's just a basic fairness point there, right? So we are working with them, and Angie and Elaine are doing a lot of events with local authorities to try and get people to take these up. But I think there's a bigger question about making sure all properties in social housing and no one's getting left behind. And that's why for the future support scheme, I put that bullet point at the end about working really closely with DOI to support that. But I do take the point, yeah.
Hi, thank you. Are we in touch with companies like Gravitricity, who does like underfloor energy storage, or Caldera, who does heat accumulators or heat batteries, and their technology has already been proven and is already available to be put in houses and things like that. It's commercially available.
Yeah, the Caldera stuff's really interesting. I follow the guy James on LinkedIn who set that company up. And so what I'm keen to do in the strategy is set out that vision of the kind of technologies that we see playing a role. So yeah, I focus a lot on heat pumps here because they, regardless of scenario, seem to be a technology we want that emerges in all of this modelling as a sensible technology. And that's not just Manx specific, it's everywhere in the UK, Europe, America. The IRA in America supports heat pumps. But beyond that, yeah, we're pretty open to a wide range of different technologies. Air-to-air heat pumps as well in flats and places like that. So we're not just air source focused. We are thinking more broadly, and those innovative technologies certainly. Yeah, the Caldera stuff's really interesting. So yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir.
Most of the local government board,
most of the local government board houses owned by government have already had double glazing, cavity wall insulation, loft insulation. So where else do you go?
So I'm not an expert on the exact breakdown of fabric in different local authority properties, but we had a meeting with DOI a couple of weeks ago with Gary at DOI, and his view was that there's still scope for improvement in a considerable number of those properties, whilst recognising that a number of them are up to a decent standard. But the perspective DOI said was very much there's still a good chunk of those that could benefit from some fabric improvements, and
Yeah.
I've worked with quite a few of the local authorities now, and their programme is a gradual survey as they go along, and as they come across properties that do need our scheme, they're introducing it. We've come to an agreement with several local authorities, I'm still working on others, that as they need our products, we will give them to fit, so we don't interfere with their heating systems and their properties as such, and it goes from there, but it is a gradual process.
Same. Dolby, as it was, or local government, but the government owned
Yeah.
sector houses. We've got bonded breed cavity wall insulation, and yeah, I don't think there's been a lot of problems.
That I'm not aware of. We haven't dealt with that, so I do mainly the loft insulation and the energy efficiency scheme. And when they do, most of them have a rolling programme to check their stock. And when they come across a property that does need it, they ask for it, we give it to them.
I mean, I guess the basic message is we'll work with DOI to figure out what they need to be done. And if, as you say, a lot of them are in decent standard, then great, we don't have to spend any money on it.
Well, I used to work in there, don't think. But we've got an estate in the north of the island, totally no heat.
Yeah.
So if anybody's worried that it don't work,
Yeah. No, I totally endorse that. And yeah, we work closely with Gary to figure out what needs to be done. Yeah.
Could you just expand a little bit on your approach to district heating schemes?
The expansion on district heating schemes is to say we need to do a lot more work on district heating schemes, essentially. So if you delve into the details of the...
There are already a couple. In fact, I think there's 3 on the island. Yeah. And again, picking up from the gentleman in the front there, I also used to work for government. So there was quite a big scheme back 2010 on cosy homes. So a lot of the local authority houses did have the energy efficiency measures unless the tenant didn't want them, which is why there's gaps still. But district heating schemes and biomass was a big push in the then administration. So there's certainly 3 taxpayer-funded district heating schemes run on biomass. They were never seen as popular for a whole variety of reasons, partly because tenants weren't used to having underfloor heating and stuff, so it was a little bit of a culture change. But it's sort of ground to a halt in the last 5 years. So I just wondered what push DEFA would be doing in terms of district heating.
Yeah, so if you look in the GemServe paper, they at a high level identify potential heat network areas that might be suitable, and their basic recommendation is go away and do another specific study on heat pumps. So I'm writing a business case to do that, basically, to answer your point. So that's something we know we need to definitely do an awful lot more work on, and I think that's a particularly interesting one in terms of the wider kind of social consequences of what we're doing, and as you say, people's level of enthusiasm and engagement, because it's the sort of thing that's deployed. There's loads of them in Denmark, right? But it's a big shift for people here. So we're keen to do that piece of work and think in the round about what that would actually look like. And there's been a lot of analysis in the UK on barriers to district heat networks that I've been reading about recently, and that's all going to feed into that business case that I'm going to write. If you've got any, based on your experience, you want to get in touch and talk to me about that, I'd really appreciate it.
Happy to. But one of the things possibly is with your planning colleagues, that the issue of district heating can be a little bit unknown. And yes, it does work in certain areas of the UK. And I'm just wondering whether some of the private developers would be willing to take that up on a private scheme as opposed to a public sector scheme, where they'd actually see some benefit and it'd be in the mainstream as opposed to just being on the fringes.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of work being done, if it's private sector, in the UK on consumer protections around this as well. So there's a whole range of things we'd have to think quite carefully about. But yeah, it'd be good to talk about it at some point. Yes.
Thank you. A lot of this is based around households, which is great to see. But if you look at the entire Alaman community, you've got all the business side of it as well. How are you linking into the corporates and the business entities to make sure that they've got the sustainable heating sources that they're moving towards as well?
That's a really good question, and it's another sort of fair criticism. Essentially, like district heat, is an area we need to do a lot more work on, and the heat decarbonisation scenarios are very domestically focused. There's a bit in there at the end on business, and again, it's a bit of a cop out, but that's an area we need to think a lot more about and build our evidence on. So sort of watch this space really, but it's something where we are aware of, and it's a fair criticism for sure.
Just to follow up on that, as an exemplar in that, is there a strategy that you have within government for looking at your own properties and the government buildings as part of those big corporate entities to try to lead the way? Yeah, so I'm going to defer to Ali. Where's Ali? There's Ali.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. There isn't one at the moment, but it will be. So we just, under the climate change fund, just provided funding for 2 officers to go work at the right to have that plan strategically, understand what assets will be kept, what won't, and what technologies will work best across these assets. Sorry, probably heard me anyway. You sat right there. But yeah, there will be. There has to be to do it properly.
Seems to be end of the questions, unless anyone has anything else. I'll wrap up now. I really appreciate your time this morning. Hope you found that interesting and useful. And as I mentioned, the team will be out in the atrium if anyone of you wants to sign up to the energy efficiency scheme, get any thoughts and advice. But in the meantime, I'll wrap up and say thanks very much. Thank you for coming.